Welcome to this Moving Panels One Shot. Let's have a nerdy little conversation. And today we're going to kind of rehash and retool and reevaluate some of the thoughts that we had in some previous episodes. So back in October, Blake joined James Brooks and I for a discussion on Alan Moore's From Hell for a Halloween October episode. Then a couple of weeks ago, Blake joined me as we talked about Alan Moore's V for Vendetta. Of course, I also already have planned Alan Moore's Watchmen for March, and as we joked about in the V for Vendetta episode, I just now have to find a way to get League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in here, and we can at least knock out the Alan Moore gauntlet, if you will, taking out all of his just canonical DC and Marvel stuff that he's done. But after the V for Vendetta episode, our good friend and co-host Chad reached out to me and Blake, and he had some thoughts. And so instead of us just hashing it out via text or phone call, I said, let's do an episode on this. And so we are going to talk some more on Moore, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Alan Moore and let Chad give his thoughts. But let me go ahead and welcome back Blake Fowler.
Thank you, Laramie. I have since gotten my psychology degree in the interim so that I can discuss Alan Moore more in-depthly.
There you go. And also Chad Smith. Welcome, Chad.
Hey, man. I feel like I'm the heel in this episode. Like
No, not the heel at all.
I was set up as the critic, the harsh critic coming after you guys. You
even said in
you
our
will not talk about Alan that way, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
You even said in our original text conversation that, it's always in the moment when we are recording.
Yeah.
30
minutes later, you think of the perfect line. You're like,
oh, that's what I was going to say.
Should have said this.
I am always,
for sure.
I'm always armchair quarterbacking my own episodes.
My favorite is when you look at your own notes and the thing you wanted to talk about completely just skipped it. Just didn't
it wasn't even on the
didn't
page.
do it at all. You're like, man. But
so Chad, I'm just gonna go. Yeah, let's just go ahead and open it up for you to go ahead and let everybody know why we decided to do this episode.
Yeah, so we being several of the co-hosts have running chats on the side, which I think Blake has alluded to on like our Braves chats and stuff like that. So we're always like chit-chatting about random stuff. And so I was listening to the podcast on, I think it was actually on Tuesday. I didn't get around to it on Monday when it came out. And I had to stop driving. I do sales for a living, so I'm like driving to accounts. And so I literally like stopped in a McDonald's parking lot to like text this out because I thought the first thing was I was so in tune with Blake. He kept saying things and I'm literally talking out loud to, my car radio at this point. And he would address it again later and it made me laugh pretty hard. But the whole like, Blake started, I forget what the thought process was, but he was like, I generally like Alan Moore and his works. And I was like, too bad Alan Moore doesn't. And then like later you said something about it, it was just very funny to me. But yeah, I'm a huge Alan Moore fan and I like V for Vendetta in particular. And so I really got into this episode. I love that movie and the comic I would argue is even better. And so it's... Yeah. I kind of wanted to dive into some of the Mooreisms, and thus this episode kind of popped up because I think he's getting to some like really deep thoughts. I know that's a shocker with it being Alan Moore, but I think he sets up a lot of stuff in some of the questions you were talking about, and that's where the whole, it's hard to really judge what people are saying on a podcast real time because you're having a conversation and I'm getting to listen to it separated. And so of course I can be like, no, what are you talking about? Like, kind of thing. But especially with V being a hero, I think, I can't remember the question exactly, but Laramie asked, is V a hero or not? How does this land? And I was arguing,
I actually asked, is he an anarchist?
Yeah, is he? It was like
anarchist. Yeah, you did ask that too.
Yeah, and then I think it delved into, is he a hero or not? After that, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anarchists, I don't know. I think maybe he's an anarchist in the sense that he does not care about consequences. Like he
certainly does
he
not.
can see nothing past revenge in that sense. But is he an anarchist in the political sense? No. Like, I don't think he cares as far as that goes. But anyways, like, I thought it was a really interesting idea. Like, is he a hero? Because he's set up that way, right? I mean, that's the way Moore writes him. He has the great origin story. He's got a freaking cape, for crying out loud. I mean, come on. He's meant to be a hero, right?
If not hero, why hero shaped? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Why are you packaging him this way?
Yeah. If it looks like a hero and walks like a hero.
But as Alan Moore's does in lots of his works, I don't think V is a hero. I don't think V sees himself as a hero. Does that make sense?
I can agree with that. I'll go that far with you. Yeah, for sure.
I don't think he is, and I think in a very twisted way, he thinks he doesn't see himself as a hero, but thinks he can create the hero. He thinks that in Evie,
I agree.
He can create a hero. Now, this is a little more philosophical and out there. Is Alan Moore being specific with the naming of Evie?
I think so. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. My weird brain went to like evolved V. Like, is he trying? He's trying to create.
I didn't think about evolve.
Okay.
Yeah,
He's trying to create like the next version of himself, but better, right? And so then you get into this very Alan Moore-ish thing in the sense that I think Alan Moore kind of is like, no, that's not possible. Like, once you're tainted by evil, like there's no redeeming that. So I kind of think that's part of what Alan Moore's talking about. But I don't know. Like, you call me way out in left field if you want to, but it's an interesting story of him trying to create what I think is an evolved V, the next version of V that's supposed to be the clean one that gets to go past the vengeance stage. And of course, like, as we see the comic in particular end, like, that's not necessarily the case.
Oh, I totally agree with. I say I agree. I never thought about the evolve aspect. What I have thought of, and this was actually a discussion I had with someone else, was that
You're cheating on the podcast? Good.
no. This was actually
you didn't talk
this
to
was
us
actually
about this.
no. This was actually that book club that I accidentally on purpose joined.
That you wandered into.
Full circle, yes.
Yeah. But in that, there was actually a discussion of it being V's way of creating a quote unquote new world, and her name being Evie, as in like Eve.
Yeah.
And then at the end, she finds her Adam.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was where I came to there was definitely a purpose of naming her Evie.
Yeah.
But I think Moore has a lot of biblical, if not religious, allusions in his work. So I could certainly see how that would be where he was going. I like both of those theories. I tend to lean more towards, again, his biblical aspects of his writing. But the evolved Eve, like taking the best parts of himself and kind of trying to transfer those onto Evie, makes a lot of sense as far as maybe not his evolution, but what he wants to see is the evolution of his work later on.
Right.
I can certainly see where that would be the case.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think he cares enough about himself.
No.
To desire anything of
not.
himself to remain. So
I mean, he's full Count of Monte Cristo. Like, he is solely for revenge. Like, that's it. Like, that's his purpose.
Yeah.
And for him. But yeah, I think later on down the line, even though if we're not going to call him a hero per se, and this is one of the things we kind of talked about in our text chat, was Chad was like, Blake said, that he is a hero somewhat, or was ambivalent on his heroism. And that's because I want him to be a hero.
Yeah.
I would like for him to be a hero, so I'm cautious to call him an anti-hero or a straight-up villain. But I think he sees his betters in Evie, and wants to pass that on.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. I think Moore is really good at doing that, about setting characters up to be likable or unlikable. Like I would argue, and I'm going to spoil this a little bit.
I want you to elaborate on him making characters likable.
Yeah,
because I have yet to see that.
Well, maybe likable isn't the right adjective, but he does do a good job of making heroic characters, the character that you want to win, and then characters that you want to despise. And he does this. I would argue Watchmen is probably the best example of this. He creates a hero, quote unquote, and Rorschach that you kind of want to hate. Like, he's dirty and weird, and you don't like him, but he is the quote unquote moral hero. He's the upstanding guy who is standing for justice. And then you have Ozymandias, who is kind of the exact opposite. Like, he's set up to be likable, even though you also want to hate him too. So to your point, Laramie, none of them are really likable.
No,
but he's the more quote unquote heroic character. He's the camera friendly guy that would be played by famous attractive actor, kind of thing. So I think Moore does this a lot, the twisting of your natural bend in what you think is heroic and the things that you desire in a hero. So he gives you heroic V and sets him up through his... I mean, I don't think anybody would argue, even though he goes down some pretty twisted paths, I don't think anybody would argue that V doesn't, have kind of a right towards justice and vengeance.
So that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, you're saying likable. I don't know that he makes them likable. He makes them
justified.
Relatable.
Sure.
He makes them, I can see why you would want to enact the type of vengeance that V enacts.
Yeah, that's a better
I would feel
adjective.
the same way. And even with Watchmen, you're watching Rorschach and you're thinking, he's kind of a tool.
Yeah.
He is just, he seems to be unlikable in a lot of aspects, but you think to yourself, okay, how would I handle the situation? I would hope I'd handle it with the moral compass of Rorschach, essentially.
Yeah.
So he makes them relatable to a degree in that you want to see yourself doing some of the same kind of things. But likable might be a stretch in some cases. Yeah. But relatable for sure.
But then with V in particular, you run into the wall of, is it okay to torture another human being, to kind of enact the justice, an innocent human being, to enact the justice that you're seeking. Yeah. So the whole thing just gets horribly twisted.
Pretty skewed, yeah.
But I mean, I'm biased. I've already said I like Alan Moore. I think that's the attractive thing about his work, though, because that's real life. No one has completely just motives. You know what I mean? Yeah. Even the idea of revenge is a pretty twisted motive. You've got... Yes, maybe you have some right to justice, and we all kind of feel that righteous anger kind of thing. But I don't think any of us think that it's really okay to murder people, to that end. We want there to be a system in place and some fair judgment, all that sort of stuff. And guys like this are, he's just going all out. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. So it makes you wrestle. Yeah.
So do you think that, because we talked about what if they continue the story, what do you think Evie's going to be like as V?
I don't know. I mean, can you have an unbiased psychologically she's destroyed. She is the worst Stockholm syndrome case of all time, so her motives basically are just replicated V's motives,
I think, Chad, in our chat, you made the comment that a lot of Moore's work has to do with the sins of the father, I think was what you... And this is one of those situations where I think if the story were to continue, because of what's happened to Evie, because of what V has done, both in the outside world and to Evie personally, that whole sins of the father aspect is going to rain down, because I can see her going down the same path as V.
Right.
She's going to feel this anger for what has happened to V, and it's just going to continue this trend of revenge for revenge's sake, almost.
Right. Yeah, I think it becomes the historically accurate, unfortunately. The conqueror, the liberator becomes the new tyrant kind of scenario. Sure. So a corrupted person taking power is never going to end well. So I think she just becomes the new fascist, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this has been mostly focused on V for Vendetta with a few other trickled in. Were you familiar with From Hell?
Yeah, I'd seen the movie. I'd never really read the work. It just I don't know why. To be honest, I had never read that one.
It's a read.
It's a read. Yeah. It's 100% that, because I will agree with you. Like V for Vendetta, like I enjoyed reading it.
Mm-hmm.
From Hell, I did not.
Yeah.
I
really
appreciated it.
I really want to go back and read that now.
I appreciated it. I appreciated it. And
do you want to punish yourself? Read it, okay?
And then I think I said this in the episode. The more I thought about it, the more I kind of went, part of me wants to go back and reread it to, see some of these little things within it. But at the same time,
that's Alan Moore's darkness grabbing a hold of your soul. So it's
like reaching up from hell to grab hold of you.
Oh man.
All right, so let's talk about other Moore stuff. So we've talked about Watchmen some, which again we're gonna talk in much more depth in March. And I've already decided both of you are going to be on the main Watchmen episode.
Hey, we're just getting this news first, baby. Like you're hearing it real time with us. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Let's talk about some of his more mainstream stuff. So probably the biggest one that most people are going to know is The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on The Killing Joke and the Mooreisms that he brought to the world of Batman?
I think it was fertile ground for sure. It's like, can you think of a property that Alan Moore could pick up and run with more than Batman? In my opinion, like that was written for Alan Moore to take
for him to take over. Yeah.
Man, talk about one that's hard to read. Like you were just talking about From Hell. Like I kind of feel the same way about that story. I'm maybe not Blake Fowler status of Batman fan, but he's certainly my favorite DC character to read, and I've been following that one for years and years. And that story is amazingly unsettling, even for a Batman story. And I think that's why it's famous in its own right, as a standalone even.
Yeah, I certainly think Batman is the prime suspect for Moore to take over as far as offering us a look at someone with enough moral ambiguity to make you question whether or not you're pulling for him in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And in The Killing Joke, I don't want to spoil anyone who hasn't read it. If you haven't read it, I do recommend obviously going to read it.
Yeah. But what are you doing here if you haven't read?
Yeah, if you haven't read The Killing Joke, it should be on your shelf right now. It's one I return to every holiday season. It's a classic. But yeah, you don't see maybe as glaring an example of moral ambiguity, because you go into Batman with preconceived notions of he's got a line he's not going to cross.
Right.
But Moore essentially takes you right up to that line, more so than anybody else ever has. And you have to start to question, okay, why is Batman doing what he's doing with the Joker? Why has he been doing it? And Moore leads you to ask those questions yourself after you're done reading it in a way that maybe you haven't before. I don't think Batman can be dark enough. I like the darker sides of Batman. I really enjoy delving into those questions about why and how and for how long and for what purpose. And Moore does a great job of asking those.
So based off of what you're saying there, I have a question.
Yeah.
What's different between Alan Moore's portrayal of Batman versus Frank Miller's portrayal of Batman?
Ooh.
You seem like you're ready to take this one, Chad.
Because you talked about him going right up
to
the edge, and I mean Frank Miller did the exact same thing.
Yeah, but Frank Miller takes more of he is the hero approach. Like, I don't know how to describe that, but that's written in, it's baked into the pie. That you still are under the assumption that Batman is the hero. But with Moore, there's this like, but is he? Like, can he be flipped? Like, can the Joker or evil in general do something enough that gets turned on its head?
And is it really just that one bad day can make or break someone? And I think too, with Moore in a 3,000-foot view, puts more of a psychological horror spin on Batman than Miller does.
Absolutely.
Whereas Miller seems to be more concerned with the geopolitical, ramifications of a Batman or a quote unquote real world Batman. Moore is looking more at Batman in his own right, in his own world, what is happening to him, and how is he coping with the things that are going on just in his own biome.
Yeah, and I think Miller is posing this thought of it's sometimes more heroic for a person to be considered the villain, whereas Alan Moore's like, no, like every human is capable of being a true villain. Yeah. So it's a very different take, even though they seem similar, and I think are both awesome and wonderful playgrounds for that character to roam around in. But also just the insanity of Moore's Joker is overwhelming. Like when I'm on record from when we did the Joaquin Phoenix movie and everything. I don't like a backstory to the Joker. It's not my favorite thing. But the uber creepy backstory that Moore pulls out throughout that work, you're just like, holy cow. It is very disturbing.
It's again, psychologically disturbing. The scenes that are written, and again, not to spoil anything, where they end up at the circus with Jim Gordon, that scene, how it's written and then drawn in the comic as well, is one that is seared into memory, and it's partially because of Moore's setup throughout the entire story. Him getting you to this point, and you thinking, how far can he go? And he continues to take it a step further each time.
Yeah, for sure.
So, are either of you familiar with his Superman story, the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow?
I can't say that I'm familiar with that one, no.
Very vaguely. Okay. Like, I remember the title, but nothing stands out about it.
Yeah, pretty much just what he does is Superman has essentially created a peaceful world, and so he decides to go off into space and do it for other planets. And in I think it's supposed to be 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, that he's gone, some of his other villains end up becoming bigger, I guess you would say. Like Bizarro ends up deciding, hey, if you are a hero who saves people, then I'm going to be a villain who kills. And he's going to be the perfect, imperfect duplicate, I think is how he refers to himself. So it's that same, just more getting into all that psychology behind it. I mean, he's got Brainiac merging with Lex Luthor. He's got, I think it even ends with Mxyzptlk actually gets trapped between Superman trying to send him to the Phantom Zone and Mix trying to go back to the fifth dimension, and it actually rips Mix in half. And Bizarro commits suicide. Pete Ross is killed. Like there's a lot that you wouldn't expect out of a Superman comic.
Put this on my to read list all of a sudden.
I know,
here.
Okay. Right? Kind of surprised DC let him play with that, but
you typically Superman is off limits to that kind of stuff. But if you're somebody like Alan Moore, maybe you get the reins to do whatever.
I was about to say, I'm sure this was post millions of dollars made on Watchmen. So,
but this would have been before
Before
From Hell, around the same time as V for Vendetta. Now, I haven't read Saga of Swamp Thing. Either of y'all familiar with Saga of Swamp Thing?
Yes, I have read that. It's pretty good work. I mean, it's I don't know. It's Swamp Thing has never been like a super cohesive story to me.
Yeah,
No.
It's just always kind of everybody who writes it, gives their own like what Swamp Thing is. It's more or less, pun intended, what you would expect.
Well, that was just like, so Bethany and I just...
That's a lot of more, yeah.
Yeah, Bethany and I just recorded Batman and Robin, and I was pointing out how there is a story that Neil Gaiman did where he gave an origin story for Poison Ivy. And I didn't bring this up in the episode, but in that same story, he also makes Pamela Isley a co-worker of Alec Holland. And then it's almost the same events that eventually lead her to becoming Poison Ivy also eventually lead him to being in Louisiana and the accident that causes him to become Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's Woodrue being the Floronic Man being connected to both of them as well.
Well, that's Neil Gaiman in a
nutshell.
No,
that's Neil
Gaiman.
He
wants there to be
a
through thread to everything.
Yeah.
Well,
it's that same thing of there's a bunch of Swamp Thing mythos.
Swamp Thing is also very fertile ground, not pun intended. It works.
I was like, wait a minute, all the puns here. She's really planting these.
But I feel like that one really is that was a good decision to turn over to Alan Moore as well, because he's a pretty morally ambiguous character also. So he does as you would expect, he does a lot of playing with those themes, like where does his humanity begin and end, all that sort of stuff. So it was a pretty good run, but
even more so than Batman, Swamp Thing is certainly a playground for Moore to get in there and get his tendrils into. And the Saga of Swamp Thing does, again, it asks all the more questions of what is good, what is bad, is there a good and bad, or is it just humanity? Like, are we just who we are, and we're going to do what we're going to do regardless of what we think or have been told is right or wrong, dependent upon the situation? Like, we find ourselves in a moment where we have to be quote unquote bad. Are we capable of doing that? And Moore says yes. We are.
Sure.
And Swamp Thing, the Saga of Swamp Thing, really, really delves into that.
All right. Well, the only one I can think of to talk about left would be, do y'all have any thoughts about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? I've never read it, so
I've just seen the movie. I haven't read it. No.
Yeah.
I read it a long time ago. I mean, the movie doesn't really do it justice. Saying that, I have to caveat that movie is a guilty pleasure. Like,
it really is, right? Okay,
it is for me
I like
too.
it.
Yes,
I enjoy the movie.
Yeah,
but at the same time, like you're saying, I know it was kind of
it's nothing like it. Yeah.
Catalyst of Moore not liking adaptations of his work was
his work in general.
Yeah, also putting an end to Sean Connery's career.
I'm not sure Alan Moore likes, life in general. Like, he lives a very ecclesiastical existence in general. But
it's like, why do I have to be alive? I don't want to be.
Yeah, for any of you who have never seen a picture of Alan Moore,
man,
you can kind of get the idea that we're talking about here. Like,
and his interviews are even better than the pictures of himself.
The very few that he allows,
If you want to just feel despondent, an Alan Moore interview will take you right up to the edge there.
Well, I mean, you read those works, all those kind of block of stuff he masterfully did in the 80s. He for sure thought that the world was going to end in nuclear war.
Oh, he thought it was over. Yeah.
For sure. He thought there was no redeeming quality in humanity and we were going to kill ourselves.
Yep.
Which, long term he might be right. But
I was
it didn't happen in nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the US. So
what does Fight Club say? On a long enough timeline, the lifespan for everyone goes down to 0.
Yeah.
So maybe he's correct eventually.
but yeah, not exactly a person you would call an optimist. And it makes its way into a lot of his work.
All right. Well, there you.
Pessimist covers him, but sorry. Go ahead.
I was thinking that's probably a good. Funny enough, say a good point to stop on.
Okay.
Is there any good, Laramie?
We
Not-
hope
not with
everyone
Alan
feels
Moore.
jolly after listening
Not
to
with
this.
Alan Moore. Absolutely.
Man.
But yeah, I thought this was a good conversation to have, because if we are going to do Watchmen in March, and then I'm going to try to find a way to get League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, then this is kind of the right in the middle of all of this work. So we've already talked about 2. We got 2 to come. And so just kind of giving our thoughts about Alan Moore just a little bit further. And that's why I titled the episode, It's More on More. And all the puns that went along with that. but we'll go ahead.
At this point, I think it should be called Chad's 2 cents. But
Yeah.
you know,
Hey, okay.
You know what? I almost titled the episode "Chad Has Some Thoughts." Like that was almost it.
As dangerous as that is, yes.
Yeah. All right, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you, Blake, and thank you, Chad, for joining me on this. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Rate and review the show. We'd appreciate it. But we're going to go ahead and end things now. And go out and be happy. That's all I'm gonna say.
Tis the
Go out and be
season.
happy. Yeah, we're approaching Christmas. We've got Christmas episodes coming up, so we're gonna get happy again.
If you misbehave, you get Alan Moore in your stocking this year. So don't do that.
Yeah. No, we got The Tick coming up, and
Yeah.
there we go.
yeah, Merry Little Batman. Those are gonna be fun, goofy things to talk about.
Very excited.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. For today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramie Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.